Welcome to another monthly portfolio update. If you are stopping by for the first time, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. In this video, I will share with you how much I invested in my taxable account in December, how many shares I bought, and the value of my portfolio at the end of December. But as always, before I continue, a quick disclaimer. The information that I'm sharing is not financial advice. Before you invest in anything, please do your own research and make sure that you only invest in things that you understand. With that being said, I will dive right into my portfolio update. I will start with a quick recap of my November portfolio to show you the value of the portfolio and how many shares I had before the beginning of December. The total value of my portfolio at the end of November was $118,929.80. $118,915.74 was the market value of my investments, and $14.06 was the cash amount. At the end of November, the total unrealized profit of my portfolio was $40,061.64. This was plus 50.80%. These are my holdings: 2 Vanguard ETFs and 2 BlackRock ETFs. VCN is a Vanguard ETF that tracks the Canadian market. I had 114 shares of a VCN at the end of November. VFV is a Vanguard ETF that tracks the S&P 500 index. This is the Canadian version of a VOO. I had 360 shares of a VFV at the end of November. XEQT is a BlackRock ETF. This is an all-in-one equity ETF, which holds Canadian equities, US equities, developed market equities outside of North America, and emerging market equities. If you want to hold a single equity ETF which is globally diversified, you might consider looking into XEQT or its Vanguard equivalent, VEQT. I had 640 shares of XEQT at the end of November. XUU is a BlackRock ETF that tracks the US total stock market, and I had 350 shares of XUU at the end of November. I will now show you how much I invested in December and how many shares I bought. I bought 2 shares of a VCN. The cost per share was $65.31. The total cost, $130.61. This is 8% of the amount that I invested in December. I bought 5 shares of a VFV. The cost per share was $168.52. The total cost, $842.60. This is 49% of the amount that I invested in December. I bought 10 shares of XEQT. The cost per share was $39.97. The total cost, $399.68. This is 23% of the amount that I invested in December. I bought 5 shares of XUU. The cost per share was $69.54. The total cost, $347.72. And this is 20% of the amount that I invested in December. In total, I bought 22 shares, all the ETFs combined. And the amount that I invested in December was $1,720.61. This is $33.34 more than the amount that I invested in November. As you can see, in November, I invested $1,687.27. And in December, I invested $1,720.61. The difference is plus $33.34. The total value of my portfolio at the end of December was $118,561.95. $118,558.50 was the market value of my investments, and $3.45 was the cash amount. At the end of December, the total unrealized profit of my portfolio was $37,983.79. This was plus 47.14%. As of December the 31st, I had 116 shares of a VCN, 365 shares of a VFV, 650 shares of XEQT, and 355 shares of XUU. Alright, let's now take a look at some quick details about each of the positions. I will start with a VCN. The closing market price on December the 31st was $64.50. The quantity of shares that I had, 116. The average price, $42.78. The book value, which is how much I have invested in VCN, was $4,963.30. The market value was $7,482. This was 6.31% of my portfolio. The total unrealized profit for VCN was $2,518.70. This was 50.75%. Next, we have a VFV. The closing market price on December the 31st was $166.62. The quantity of shares that I had, 365. The average price, $110.71. The book value was $40,411.93. The market value was $60,816.30. This was 51.29% of my portfolio. The total unrealized profit for VFV was at $20,404.37. This was a 50.49%. Then we have XEQT. The closing market price on December the 31st was at $39.89. The quantity of shares that I had, 350. The average price, $28.31. The book value was $18,402.39. The market value was at $25,928.50. This was at 21.87% of my portfolio. The total unrealized profit for XEQT was at $7,526.11. This was 40.90%. Finally, we have XOU. The closing market price on December the 31st was $68.54. The quantity of shares that I had, 355. The average price, $47.31. The book value was $16,797.09. The market value was $24,331.70. This was 20.52% of my portfolio. The total unrealized profit for XOU was $7,534.61. This was 44.86%. Stocks finished the month of December in red territory. My portfolio went from being up 50.80% at the beginning of the month to just 47.14% at the end of the month. This is a decrease of 3.66%, even though I invested $1,720.61 in December. One factor that contributed to such a decline in my portfolio is the fact that the Canadian dollar appreciated relative to the US dollar in December. Since most of my investments are in Canadian dollar denominated ETFs that hold US stocks and are unhedged, they are subject to currency fluctuations. If the US dollar appreciates relative to the Canadian dollar, an ETF like VFV will gain additional value beyond the movement of its underlying US stocks. On the other hand, if the Canadian dollar appreciates relative to the US dollar, as was the case in December, an ETF like VFV will lose additional value beyond the movement of its underlying US stocks. In a nutshell, that's what happened in December. If you take a look at the S&P 500 index, its decline in December was marginal. The index lost only 0.05%. This is the first time that the S&P 500 index has had a negative monthly return since April 2025, when the index ended the month with a loss of 0.76%. Despite a sluggish December and all the turmoils we experienced in 2025, the S&P 500 index returned 17.90% for the year, adding to the 23.31% return in 2024 and to the 26% return in 2023. This is the third year in a row of double-digit return. It's possible that the stock market continues to rise in 2026, just as it's possible that we experience a pullback, a correction, a bear market, or even a crash. Nobody really knows how the stock market will perform in 2026. What is important for long-term investors is to invest every month consistently and to stay the course and not leave the market. So when we experience gains like the past 3 years, we don't miss them. Alright, feel free to leave a comment below. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time with another update. Peace out.